Paul?
Yeah, we can confirm that we are now recording the meeting and I'm putting the details on our website as we speak.
Okay, well, we're live on the meeting. Thank you. So I'm asking all councillors to mute their microphones unless they wish to speak. The Democrat Social has just confirmed that the meeting is now being live streamed. And I've got some announcements to make tonight. Members are reminded the meeting held on the 23rd of February 2021 was adjourned, as I think we all remember, and has been reconvened for this evening. Only the items on the agenda not dealt with at that meeting may be discussed tonight. Members are asked to use the raised hand function should they wish to speak. If you don't use the raised hand function, you may not get called to speak, and ensure they unmute their microphones when speaking. All members should mute their microphones unless invited to speak by me, the chair. Also want to just say that my vice chair, Pinder Chalm, will actually let each member, when they're speaking, know when there's 1 minute left on their time. And then the Democratic Services Officer will then mute you when your time is up. So it's done very fairly on time alone. So everyone's treated the same. Does everyone understand that, please? This is partly to make sure. Yeah. Sorry, Councillor Pritchard, do you want to speak? Are you happy? Okay, so just to make sure you get as much business as you can done in a timely manner. So on that basis, I want to start with apologies for tonight. I got the apologies from Councillor Alan Botwood, Robin Brown, Andy Kilbride, Brian Oldham, Lisa Semantis, and Winston Strachan. Are there any other apologies people want to put forward, please?
Roger Chair, Clark. Councillor Steve Osborne.
Steve Osborne, thank you, Suresh.
Roger Clark, Chairman.
Roger Clark, thank you, Phil.
Johnny Amos will be in and out of the meeting, Chair.
Thank you, actually, Councillor Smith. Okay, thank you. Sorry, hi there. Well. So who's that? Is that Danielle?
Councillor Wayne Howard.
Oh, Wayne Howard, thank you, Amy. So we now move on to the previous agenda, item 11, pay policy statement. I'm now going to invite Councillor Malcolm Longley to introduce the report and move the proposal. Malcolm, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. I don't think I'm going to need 5 minutes or anything really like that. And
that's excellent news. Good start.
Yes, good start. Right. Well, if you've all read, and I hope you have, the overriding document, the purpose of the report, what it will say is that, in fact, this is an interim report. There's no real facts behind it because they will be coming out and will be presented and sometime in the summer for you all to have a proper debate. But it's a statutory requirement for April the 1st. So I can't imagine that this can be any way contentious because the real debate will take place in the summer. So I'm going to let you, if you haven't already read the report, read it. It's very innocuous, and I'd like to propose it to be accepted tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. Do we have a seconder? Can't see one yet.
Happy to second in the absence of anybody else, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Larrett. Are there many members of the Shadow Authority who wish to comment on this item? Councillor Stone, can you please use electronic hand, please?
I have used it.
Oh, haven't you? It's not showing up on my.
Yeah, it is.
It is. Oh, my apologies, Dan. It is now. Yes, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Stone.
My group, this may not be contentious, but my group will be voting against it, and we look forward to the fuller report in the timescale that Councillor Longley indicated, and we will hope that it will include a return to national pay and conditions for the staff, and it will include a commitment to the Living Wage Foundation, Living Wage, and the accreditation for that. So until it does include that, I'm afraid we won't be able to vote for it.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Councillor Emma Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. At the last meeting, we agreed councillor allowances at 2/3 of the pay of our lowest paid workers. And in some instances, we were suggesting a remuneration allowance of more than our lowest paid workers. The way that you make sure that everyone's got a proper opportunity is by ensuring proper pay for all. And whilst this might be an interim document, it doesn't do that. Our local government workers have kept the country going during COVID. I think we can all agree on that. And in one of the most difficult years ever for local authorities and their staff, this report doesn't fill them with hope, in my opinion. They've worked over and above the cause of duty, putting themselves and their families at risk to support the national effort against COVID. The government promised to do whatever is necessary to support these efforts, and for a new local authority to have a pay policy that shows that it isn't committed to that position or holding the government to account for their decisions, in my opinion, is a mistake. And that step is imperative for our residents and to the employees of this particular authority. As a council, we have to think about whether our pay policy aligns with our goals and values, and I don't believe that it does this or sets it out clearly. From this document, which I appreciate, as I've said, and as you've said, is an interim document, there's nothing to attract or retain the right staff across our lowest paid workers. It doesn't reference a commitment to NJC terms, and in fact, it shies away from it entirely. It references discussions with trade unions, but it doesn't detail at all how that consultative framework is going to take place and whether any members will be part of that consultative framework. And it doesn't address a real living wage or our commitment to doing so. The differential in pay between the chief officers and the lowest paid is scandalous, quite frankly. And it does nothing for morale in a newly established authority, and nothing at all to engage the retention of staff at all levels, not just at the highest paid. The document doesn't give a platform to work or a pay policy that supports us as a standout authority, nor as a standout employer.
1 minute remaining.
I'm finished. Thank you, Councillor Choham.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Roberts. Councillor Bearsworth.
Thank you, Chair. This to me, although it's an interim report, could have done a lot more to actually highlight, especially our lower paid staff. Let's face it, they've held this town and county together all through the pandemic and done extra jobs and extra work and worked from home, looked after children that are left home from school. It's a huge thing. I have to agree that it was a golden opportunity to set a place in time to say what we were going to do in the summer, how we value our staff, how we see them getting what they want, seeing them making sure that they have some progress. We've got council tax going up 5% or 4.99, and you've got the lowest paid earning a lot less than a councillor's allowance. It's just, it doesn't ring true. I just wondered if Councillor Langley could actually explain to me why wasn't any of this taken into consideration?
Thank you, Councillor Bearsworth. It's Councillor Longley, by the way.
Longley, sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah. Are there any more speakers on this before I go back to Councillor Longley? No. Okay, Councillor Longley, can you respond? You've got 3 minutes, sir.
Yeah, that's just fine. Just first of all, Sally, I get called all sorts of things, and Langley or Longley doesn't really want to respond.
Worse.
I well understand that. I'll deal with Danielle's first. Danielle doesn't either include or exclude it. This is a very early start. You will well know that there are discussions going on about the arrangements can take place, and the last thing I will do is try and put forward something that is premature. And I think all the comments, particularly yourself and Danielle, it's neither included nor excluded. It's just early days. We don't know where, you know, we're working hard to try and get it squared up, and your inputs are greatly appreciated. You know, we're not deaf to that. And the CEO we've got there, you know her very well, you know her capabilities, and I'm sure she'll take that on. So, but this is all about an interim. It's really a statutory thing. We're not trying to make a statement here at all. It's a statutory requirement, and that's what we've done. But your points are well made, and all of them we take into account, I'm sure. And thank you, Sally, for putting my name right. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Longley. We have got your name right. Can we now move to ask the Democratic Services Manager to take a vote on the proposal, please?
we are doing our best to try and manage a difficult situation here. I am ready to launch the poll, Chair, if you are.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I'm just launching the poll now. Members will have 20 seconds to cast their vote.
This is going to keep happening.
There's no public.
I move forward talking.
Okay, so the results, 72% in favour, 22% against, 6% abstentions. Or we want the actual votes, 56 for, 17 against, 5 abstentions. So that one is carried. I declare the proposal carried. Thank you. We now move on to scheme and members' allowances 21 to 22. I'm going to invite the chair of the panel to introduce the report, but first of all, if John Cade, I hope, is with us tonight.
Indeed, I
John,
am.
is there?
I am, Chair.
John, yeah, I want to just apologise to you for the last meeting, sir. You had to put up for 3.5 hours, and we weren't anticipating that, unfortunately. So I do apologise on behalf of everyone. And at least this time you got in on good time once we got the meeting started.
Indeed, so.
So over to you, sir. Over to you, John, to introduce your paper.
So good evening, councillors. This has certainly been a complex challenge for my panel colleagues, Anne, Alan and myself. And I'd just like initially to thank Anne, who was previously the Vice-Chancellor of the University of Northampton, and Alan, previously the Chair of the County, for all the work and help they've given. It's complex, not just because there's no baseline, as there are for your sovereign councils, but also because inevitably your governance structures are still evolving. We therefore consider it really important that we should have some principles for our work. And I thought it'd be most useful if I looked at our recommendations in the context of those principles. The first principle concerns the interim period from the 1st of April to the 11th of May. We do not believe the government intended or residents wanted a vacuum or void in this period. There will certainly be purdah period, but there's issues which councillors will need to pick up with COVID and other community issues as well, and there will be some decisions that will need to be made, hence our recommendations there. The second principle was the importance of picking the right comparator councils, and with your officer support, we selected 7, as you could see: Bournemouth, Christchurch and Dorset, Buckinghamshire, Chester West and Chester, Cornwall, Durham, Dorset and Wiltshire. All of those 7 authorities have been through a similar process, like yourself, in creating a unitary authority. A third principle was there anything special about West Northamptonshire? I'm sure you all feel there is already, but there is the fact that Northampton is within the West Northamptonshire, and Northampton, of course, was the largest district council, and it is a significant town in its own right. As we say within the report, without any embroidery here, we do believe this will present some particular challenges around the large conurbation and actual rural mix. And of course, in the other authorities we've looked at, for example, Swindon in Wiltshire, Milton Keynes in Bucks, they were not in the new unitaries, they stood alone separately in relation to that. We wanted, as a fourth principle, for there to be a clear, transparent and justified methodology for determining your allowances. And the basic allowance is pivotal to this in 2 ways. Your special responsibility allowances will be a factor of that. And also, if there was a consistent theme at all in the evidence that we received, we would have liked a bit more evidence, but recognise that many councils are not going forward to the new council. It was that the basic allowance should be at a level to attract a wider demographic of people putting themselves forward to become councillors and playing an active part in council life. That was the really consistent feature. And I know from chairing other independent remuneration panels, that is a factor which is shared across the country in relation to that. And by inference, of course, the current level of allowances are not sufficient to actually to do that. Allowances are not a salary, they're a recognition. Also, other factors will enable other people to come forward, like when you have your meetings in the evening or in the actual daytime. But we saw this as a really important factor to get you off to the best possible start. Looking at those comparator authorities, as we given in 4.9 of our report, the span that for basic allowances runs from 12,351 to 15,596. 5 of those 7 authorities have allowances greater than 13,000. Most of those allowances also relate to 2021. We are recommending for you 21-22. So our recommendation of 13,750, we felt appropriate, fitted in with what you're looking for to attract a wider demographic, and also with other authorities who've been through a similar process in relation to that. The next principle was the role of the leader. The new leader of the council is going to be absolutely crucial. He or she will be the person to take the lead in establishing the priorities, behaviours, values and culture of the council. For an authority of your size and your reach, it will almost invariably be a full-time job. Hence our recommendation there. The next principle related to other posts and how far we could actually differentiate in terms of recommending SRAs. And here we need to recognise that much of your governance structure is still emerging. For example, we do not know what decisions will be taken by full cabinet, which by individual cabinet members, if they are taken to cabinets, and which will be delegated officers. Hence our recommendation that we hope there's a strong base for our recommendations, but we would like to do a follow-up in 9 to 12 months time, which I know is a similar recommendation for Northamptonshire actually as well in relation to that. Next principle was that for non-executive roles, rather than just providing necessarily the same SRA, we've sought to see whether there can be some differentiation in terms of roles. And here from our report, we have highlighted overview and scrutiny and audit, because we do believe there are key roles to actually play. And I think, I don't know how many of you saw, been widely covered in today's paper, the National Audit Report, which is actually saying, if I read it through here, that that 1 in 12 English councils are at significant risk of financial failure as a result of the impact of the pandemic. You're quite well placed because of the reserves that come forward to you in relation to that, but the importance of keeping on the ball in terms of the financial elements is really important. The challenge that will come from overview and scrutiny is going to be really important, and we believe the role of audit is going to be very, very important as well. The next principle concerns the operation groups, and here I do just need to make an adjustment in terms of our report in relation to it. It's just what was in brackets after that. This amount is to be shared just by the non-executive roles. It is not to be part of the executive. So where we show the factor of divided by 94, it wouldn't be 94, it would just be shared amongst those which are in the operation group. So that's a factor that needs to be adjusted. The principle we actually outline is still there, which it is actually to the opposition group and then divided according to the size of the actual groups. The final principles was consistently, we'd like to see index linking of allowances. It means that rather than having a big stutter every 4 years, they move forward. If there is any movement in each year, it's easier for the public to actually understand in relation to that. And we suggest that is linked to the officer's annual pay award. And then I think the final principle is, given what we're saying is wanting to encourage the maximum number of people to actually put themselves forward, the wider demographic there, is we see a real importance for the dependents and carers allowances. And that's why we've made the increase in the allowance figures for those in relation to that. So some of the principles which have influenced our work, we recognise that allowances is a very, very contentious issue across all councils in relation to that. I thanked my panel members at the start. Can I conclude by thanking Catherine Whitehead and Tracy Tiff for the excellent support they gave for us in terms of the work we did. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Steve, John. In fact, I'll invite you to come back towards the end for any questions.
Indeed, so. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
Thanks, sir. I'm now going to invite Councillor Alan Brown to introduce the paper from the member point of view.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and firstly, thank you very much to Mr. Cade and his team for the work that they've put into this. I think he's given an excellent explanation tonight around his methodology and the rationale behind the scheme of allowances that has been proposed to us. And I think it's of particular significance that he and his team have closely examined comparable councils elsewhere in the country, and that the allowances offered in West Northamptonshire should be based in terms of what comparable councils are paid elsewhere in the country. I don't intend to speak for too long on this issue, Mr. Chairman. As Mr. Cade himself said, this is a contentious issue. I don't think it behoves us very well to spend too long talking about our own pay, an important issue though it is, in terms of principle and the impact it has upon the council. All I would say in addition is that we would, as a Conservative group, like to insert one item and recommendations, which is to add 2.3, and it's merely to request that the independent remuneration panel be reconvened at the earliest opportunity to reconsider whether it would be appropriate to provide a further allowance for members of the fostering and adoption panel, given the amount of in-depth reading and attendance at lengthy fortnightly meetings required of those members. So as a consideration, we'd like a further report on that issue in due course. But I have nothing further to add at this stage, Mr. Chairman. I move the report, and I'm sure that members will have comments and questions to Mr. Cade.
That's very kind, Councillor Brown. Thank you much indeed. I'm now going to invite Councillor Phil Larratt to second the proposal. You have 3 minutes, Phil.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just like to, like Adam, thank everybody who's been involved in this. And other than that, I'll reserve my right to speak, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Larratt. I've been notified of a proposed amendment to this item. I'm going to invite Councillor Ian McCord to propose an amendment. Councillor McCord, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I too wish to place on record my thanks to John Cade and his team for what they've done and the way they've gone about getting evidence and coming to conclusions. As he rightly said, this is an area where there are no winners, and everybody heads into this territory with a little bit of trepidation. The number of hours that I think members who are going to be successful in West Northants Council will have to put in will be quite high, and the number of opportunities then to do other things will be reduced. And I'm very pleased to see that they're trying to set an allowance to attract a wide range of people. Because if you look across councils in general, and I'm not talking about any of our existing ones, but councils in general, you can almost see particular types of people on right across all parties, and local government attracts certain types. And I think if we can help that by the allowances, that's useful. I do wish to move an amendment, and it's mostly around the chairs. So I appreciate that no one really knows at the moment what workload and what relative workload one set of chairs will have to another. So what I wish to just do is quite simply make them all equal. So all of the chairs would be getting the basic allowance as a special responsibility allowance. And then the overview and scrutiny one, I like the formula that the panel comes up with, so 20% of that, which would be 2750. The one, if you do that, you end up actually with about £2,000 different outside of the funding envelope. And I would propose also then that the lead member for children's services have the responsibility allowance set at 1.66 of the basic allowance, which is a little more than the other cabinet members and a little less than the deputy leader. And the reason for that, I think, is to actually spotlight the fact that this is a statutory role and does have a statutory responsibility. It's the only position other than leader that does have a statutory responsibility, and that will also allow that person the ability to attend the relevant conferences and the professional development that's necessary, that should be going with the children's role to do that properly. And if we really are determined to get our children's services into outstanding, then I certainly think this is a small step along the way. And finally, whilst I can follow the logic of where the opposition payments are based on the size of the opposition parties, I do have a concern that it would be administratively difficult, because it would need even a vacancy or members going from a party to independent and back again, following all sorts of disputes and things that can happen within parties, that other particularly non-affected people could then have their special responsibility allowance floating around because of a bust-up going on in another party. And I think there's a little bit of unfairness in that. And I also think it would be administratively difficult, where our committee services will be writing to payroll every month to say it's this, it's that, and it's the other. And I think a fixed amount would be better. And therefore, I'm proposing that the leader of the largest opposition group gets 11,000, and then just halve that for each of the next three. So half to 5.5, half to 2750, and halve again to 1375. And that actually would that be paying a special responsibility allowance to 5 groups, which I suspect would be getting down to rather low. So that is the totality of my amendment. It is all within the funding envelope. I am not changing at all.
Sorry, Ian, you muted. I think you muted, Ian.
I think I was.
That's better. I can hear you now. Yeah.
I said it's all within the total funding envelope, and I'm not changing the total cost or the total value that the independent panel have placed on members in general, and that's the amendment I wish to move. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor McCord. Got a second, Councillor Jonathan Nunn.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm pleased to.
3 minutes, Jonathan.
No, well, I'm pleased to second, and if I may, I'd like to reserve my right to speak if there's a debate. Thank you.
You may do, yes. I think there will be a debate. I'm just going to check the hands that are up now. Councillor Beersworth, is it on the amendment you wish to speak, on the main item?
I cannot speak on both. If you, I'll speak on this one.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor.
I just wanted to thank John Cade and his team. It's very difficult, and it's a difficult job to establish. A few things I'd like to say. All councillors have a statutory duty to children in care, not just the portfolio holder, all of us. Secondly, I was on the adoption panel for 10 years. I served 16 on the county council, and for 10 years I did it without any allowance at all. And then when the allowance was put on, I had to come off because I was a Liberal Democrat and the others had the allowance, and I wanted to do it for nothing, but they wouldn't let me. So I really do feel injured about that. The second thing is, when I was a county councillor, I was paid £9,000 a year for being a councillor, which is the whole ward in which I'm standing in next time. And now we're going to have 3 councillors. So instead of costing the taxpayer £9,000, we'll be costing them £41,250 for 3 councillors. And I just want the public to know that this money is what we're having to pay. to, I know we're not having borough councils and parish councils don't get paid, and rightly so. But I feel sometimes that the leader doesn't seem to understand that it's not just the portfolio holder that has statutory duty, it's all councillors that have a statutory duty to look after children. I will reserve what I'm going to do with my vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beardsworth. Councillor Stone.
Thank you very much. I'm going to try and combine my comments to both the amendment and the substantive, if that's okay.
Thank you for that.
I really do thank John Cade for the work him and his team have done. I know it's a very complex issue, and he's right, it is always very contentious. I'm of the opinion, and my group is of the opinion, that it's really, really important that councillors are seen as very productive people and are properly remunerated. We haven't got an issue with that. And that is in line with European Union protocols, which the UK have signed up to. The issue for us isn't that. The issue for us is about context, and it's about fairness and proportionality. So you'll recall the amendment I put in my budget statement at the last meeting, when I was arguing for lower allowances, proportionate and fair, given the context that we are in. So we are in a context where we're seeing a massive increase in the impoverishment of our communities and our families. It seems to me that if they're going to take a hit, then we need to take a hit as well. I think the fact that the cost to the public purse of councillors in any one division, if you take a division like mine at Castle, we have a county councillor and 3 borough councillors. The remuneration at the moment is in the region of £28,000. It's going to go up to over £41,000. Now, I know we're going to be super busy, and I hope we're going to be very productive, but that seems to me to be an incredible hike. And I don't see that that is at all proportionate. I think there's a lot of merit in the amendment, but I think the sticking point for me is the basic allowance and the chair's allowances as well. And I think the public need to know, when we're talking about allowances and we're talking about special allowances, that they get combined. So actually the proposal to have the leader's allowance at £48,000 a year, I understand it's going to be a complex job. I understand it'll probably be a full-time job. But in this day and age, when we are seeing a huge hike in unemployment, people living in absolute poverty, I think we have got to be proportionate in what we do. So yes, we need councillors properly remunerated. We want the public to understand that we need to work really hard on their behalf, and that we want the widest demographic. Everybody's agreed with that. We don't want a lack of allowances or you know, very low allowances to be another obstacle that gets in the way of people from all the different communities coming in, from all the different age ranges coming in, from...
You're muted yourself, Danielle. You're muted.
I didn't do it.
No,
sorry, I didn't see the minute.
I agree with all that.
It's because the time's up, sorry.
I think
time's up, is it? My apologies. Your time's up, Danielle. Sorry, I do apologise. We now move on to the next speaker, Councillor Lofts, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll address both the proposed amendment and also the substantive. I understand what the leader is trying to do, which is he's trying to apportion payments where he thinks they should lie because of the workload and responsibility, etc. The area that I've got some issues with is his proposals for the opposition groups. And I think that the report that's come forward from the independent panel, I think is the one that we should be adopting. I take his point that it gets complicated if the size of the groups changes during the year, but it's easy enough to get around that by saying that those allowances will be paid as of the size of the groups at each annual general meeting. and they continue then for the year until the following annual meeting when they can be readjusted. So it only takes one annual readjustment. His wording of the amendment actually doesn't make sense. What happens if you end up with 6 opposition groups? What happens if you end up with only 1? That's not covered in his wording. And I think that's very loose, sloppy proposal. Because if you end up with only 1 opposition group, that opposition group, according to his proposal, only gets 50% of the 20,000. There's no reapportionment of the rest. So it's very sloppily worded, and I'm surprised he's come forward with such a disappointing amendment. He obviously hasn't consulted Democratic Services over it, and he obviously hasn't thought about it properly. So we won't be supporting his amendment. On the substantive, I agree entirely with what Councillor
1 minute remaining.
Councillor Stone and Councillor Beardsworth has said. The proposals are setting the levels much too high. The current cost of democracy in each of the wards is on average about 28,000, has been said, and it's now going to increase to 41,000. And I just hope that the Conservatives, when they're knocking on doors, can actually defend that amongst the public. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Lofts. Yes, so just to remind people, it's 3 minutes the speech is for. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I won't take 3 minutes, as many of the points I would have liked to have been making have been made by Councillor Lofts and Councillor Stone. I do have a question, even about the standard allowance that is proposed. Now, I agree that we must have an allowance that makes it possible for people to be a councillor without losing out, without feeling that their career, their home life is going to suffer. It has got to be properly paid. But the idea that people are attracted to be councillors by the amount of money, I find that quite a difficult argument to go along with. If the argument was a genuine argument, how would you think we would do if we had 10,000 or if we had 15,000 as our standard allowance? Has there been any sort of thought? Is there any evidence? Are there any data that lies between the thinking that has led to the 13,750? Other than the comparison with other councils that probably pluck numbers out of the air, just in the way that we might be doing here. So I do have a concern there. The only other point that I would say, I'm not going to comment on proposals for the funding of opposition parties. But remember, if a council is going to be successful, it has got to be democratically successful. We are here because of what has happened in the county council over the last couple of years. We've got to design our council in a way that has got some protection from that. And that means we have got to have a strong opposition, or even if opposition is made up of more than one party. And I think it is foolish to assume that you need big responsibility payments for those who are going to chair committees, without recognizing the responsibilities that lie with members of the opposition and leaders of the opposition to hold the council to account, to make sure that that debate actually takes place, that the council has asked all the right questions. So I just hope that would be taken on board.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Olga.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't often talk on matters of remuneration because I think politics should be kept out of it. And I'd like to thank Mr. John Kay and his team for their independence review and their proposals put before council. This isn't a Conservative, Liberal Democrat, Labour or any other party. This is an independent group. But I was, and I'm going to break my golden rule by commenting, and it's just simply to thank them for thinking of those individuals in our communities that would love to serve and cannot for financial reasons. And of course, all of us sitting here, invariably, we're privileged, because many of us have financial circumstances which allows us to serve. allows us to take whatever allowance the independent group suggests. But then you create a political elite. And I want to disassociate myself with those councillors that want to create a political elite by keeping it as low as possible so that we can't get more people into politics, because they simply need the allowance to sustain their homes, pay for their food, and to keep their households going. So I'd like to thank the Independents group for doing this. I now speak to the public, please. I know 13,750 isn't a lot of money, but it is an amount of money which you hopefully can sign up to do public service. It's a fantastic privilege and an honour, but it shouldn't just be for those who can afford to do it. We've got to have a wider demographic of individuals involved so we can have better politics and better governance in our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Olga. Councillor Emma Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Very, very briefly, I agree completely that we need to encourage all demographics and people from all walks of life to be involved within the council. But I take a bit of an issue with saying that the way to do that is by upping councillor allowances. The way to do that is by ensuring that their pay is appropriate in the first place, and that the living wage is paid, and that they are remunerated for the job that they do, or we support them with childcare, or we have better childcare facilities for those who want to get involved with public life. I think it's a strange stance to take, to have not a commitment to good terms and conditions, but to suggest that the reason that an allowance would be set is simply so that somebody can get into politics. Don't think that's correct.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Randall. Councillor Randall? Are you muted, Councillor Randall?
Sorry, Chair. I'm
Yeah.
muted and muted again. Yes, listening to what's being said and about special responsibilities, that should mean just that. And when services fail, then that person should take those responsibilities, because in the past, when we have seen child services suffer the way they have, and all the the deaths of these poor little babies that we've seen, who has taken responsibility? I didn't see anybody take responsibility for that. And also, you talk about this money. I know a lot of people who work full time and are only just about managing to scrape that bit of money. When I become a councillor, I didn't even know there were any allowances. And I can remember, Councillor Miller, that after my first meeting, I did ask you whether allowances should be paid on attendance to meetings, because you can claim that money and you only have to attend 2 meetings a year. There is nothing that you have to prove how you're serving the public. So you can get elected and you can do absolutely nothing for a whole year. You get paid whether you're off sick, you get paid whether you're on holiday, so it is a huge amount of money, and I really think it's way above. And I agree with Councillor Roberts of what she's just said. So there's no way that I can agree to these allowances. Thank you,
Councillor Randall. Councillor Zoe Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Really, just to briefly echo what other people have said, I think in terms of the allowances, what really needs to happen is that we need to make it accessible to all demographics. That's about making our meetings as accessible as possible. That's about helping people with enough allowance to manage the things in their life that allow them to attend meetings. It's not to do a really inflated allowance. And the other thing, and the comments been made about privilege, I actually know a number of councillors in this meeting who wouldn't consider themselves privileged at all, who've gone through really difficult times. And I think we can't assume that everybody at this meeting has that kind of privilege. And what we really need to do in terms of making our meetings accessible is we need to have times that are accessible, We need to have attitudes that are accessible. We need to make sure that meetings do not feel hostile and aggressive and unpleasant and homophobic and transphobic and sexist. And I think that is a way that we can attract more people into councils. That's what we need to focus on, and that's where our barriers are. And I think we need to think about that and focus on that rather than dancing around inflated allowances.
Thank you, Councillor. Thanks to Councillor Smith. Sorry about that. Councillor Carol Billingham, please.
I think Councillor Nunn was indicating.
No, then you go first, because Councillor Nunn reserved the right to speak as seconder.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
I just wanted to make a couple of very, very brief points.
You may do, yeah. Thank you.
One of them is that if you read the brief of a councillor, attending meetings is a very small part of that responsibility. So I think we have to remember that allowances are there to cover everything that a person does when they are carrying out their role as a councillor, which may be in their ward, it may be at council meetings, or it may be meeting with officers when you're not in a meeting. So I think we need to look at the whole picture. I do think we need to make it as inclusive as possible. I do think that there are people who need to have some cushion so that if they have to take time off work unpaid to do council business, they know that they have a cushion there, which may not be the case otherwise. And I would finally reiterate what I said when this meeting was first held in a slightly different context, that the fact that you are offered an allowance does not mean you have to take it. And if you choose to take an allowance, you do not have to take the maximum. It is up to you entirely how much you take and whether or not you take it at all. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor. Councillor Chown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to contribute to this debate as well. Many times in this chamber, we've heard female members or people speak about, gender equality and closing the gender pay gap and so on. So I'm quite astonished that we are having this conversation, first of all. If we think about the pandemic, women have been impacted with this pandemic more across than any other group, in the sense that women take part-time jobs and take on the role as carers as well. So by cutting the council allowance, what you're creating is a barrier for women and even young people to enter politics. So, and I agree with what the other councillors are saying as well, that we're creating this kind of culture where only the privileged can actually enter politics, which is really, really dangerous. So I think politics needs to be more inclusive and allow people from all walks of life to participate as well. And then there was a comment made about, providing better childcare. So I think that was covered actually with the dependents care allowance as well, which I definitely welcome. So, I just wanted to say, and there was another comment about meetings being transphobic and, being, I've never, ever attended any meeting where any kind of disrespect was shown in that way to anyone. So I think some clarification should be provided there, and it's quite unfair to make those accusations. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chown. Councillor Meredith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I'm going to speak on the two, on the amendment and on the substantive.
You've got 3 minutes, Dennis. Yeah, 3 minutes.
Yeah. It's very important that councillors have an allowance. Most councillors, in my opinion, work very, very hard and are very, very dedicated. If you are a councillor, especially for when the unitary comes in force, you're going to have lots of work to do. If you take my particular area where I represent, I don't really get any time off at all. I'm sort of on call most of the day. I mean, just today I've had 6 phone calls to ask me to do casework. And I've actually been sitting here and I've just logged in a casework item while I've been listening to the debate because of the time factor. So it is important to have these allowances. The Independent Remuneration Act has given us a very, very fair, report, and I think that is actually a good report to give. I certainly will be voting against the amendment, but I will be voting for the substantial motion because I think it's quite important that if we want to attract decent people, decent people to be councillors, and it's a very high thing to be a councillor for people to be, and that's all I wanted to say. And if you're in a ward like mine, where there's lots and lots of deprivation, lots of different issues, you would see how important it is to have a decent allowance scheme. I never claim expenses. I just take my allowance because I have to do my printer, everything, going to meetings, telephone calls, internet. So it's soon eaten up. It really is. That's all I wanted to say, Chris.
Thank you, Councillor Meredith. Thank you for that. Councillor King.
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a lot of very valid points that have been mentioned today. Personally, my own experience, it's a 24-hour job. If you want to stand for council, you need to dedicate your whole entire life. You sometimes need to put your family on hold. There's lots and lots of dedication that is submitted to this role. I personally was asked to stand. I didn't know about the allowances at the beginning either, but you soon begin to realise that this is from 6 o'clock in the morning. As soon as you wake up, you are doing emails, you're constantly engaging with members of the public, and there's so much work. Some people might say that the allowances are too high, but you need to think about, in the real world, what is your dedication, and that's all I'm going to say on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor King. Councillor Nunn, you did ask to reserve the right to speak a second there, so here's your opportunity, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll keep my comments brief. As everybody has said, I'm grateful to the panel for the huge amount of work, which is pretty much bang on. We've made a couple of suggestions here because we believe in equality amongst the chairs. Good chairs in council committees work really hard, irrespective of the nature of that committee. And I think local planning chairs, for example, will work everybody as hard as a strategic chair dealing with strategic planning applications. So that's a matter of equality. I think on the opposition leaders, it's just looking for a more workable system. Along the lines, I believe, that Mr. Cade had direct contact from one of the opposition leaders looking for such a thing. So I think it is just a fairer, more workable situation. It is the fact that the person in the street, the man or woman in the street, can stand for council. Therefore then is there just the need to turn up, I think, at least every 6 months, and that's that. But look, really, honestly, look at the people on the screen. Does anybody really do that? If you're part of a party group, you're probably getting a lot of pressure from colleagues to say, come on, pull your weight, we need you on the team. And even if you're not, there is a focus and responsibility on you. So I think everybody works pretty hard. All of my friends across all parties certainly do. People have made the comment of privilege, and since I put my hands up and others have spoken, this point has partly been covered, but we did have the initial comments from people who, I don't know the direct circumstances, but I feel they've got years of successful careers behind them, and that does put them in a slightly more privileged position, and congratulations to them for that. I admire their success than many of the people we might be seeking to get onto the council. And I know from every party, my own party and other opposition parties, people whose lives have changed positively from the perspective that when they chose not to stand, or perhaps they didn't win an election, they were able to commit to their working life, let alone their family life, a great deal harder. Let's be clear, if you get elected to the Unitary Council, you'll be in for a business where if you work an employed job, you'll be using your holiday. Your employer may give you time off for public service. You'll be using your holiday. You'll be using your flexi time. You'll be reading till 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning papers in order to get prepared for meetings the following day. My view is we should not be restricting the people who come forward for election either by age or by the careers they have behind them and the privilege. So I do think this is a fair level, and it seems to compare favourably, appropriately with other councils. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Just want to remind people that the mover of this amendment has no right to reply. So I'm going to ask actually that the chair, I now ask Councillor Adam Brown to reply to the debate on the amendment. You've got 3 minutes, Adam.
Chairman, given that most of the comments were on the substantive item rather than the amendment itself, I don't think that anything else needs to be added before we go to the vote on the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. Councillor Brown. So I now ask the Democratic Service Managers to take a vote on the amendment, please.
Yeah, we're just going to move the members of the public back to the waiting room. So if you just bear with us for a few moments while we do that, and then I'll launch the vote.
Thank you.
Nigel, just
Input in the waiting group. Victoria Perry.
I know she's.
Okay, Councillor Miller, I think we're just about there, so I'm going to launch the poll.
She shouldn't vote.
Members will have 20 seconds to cast their vote. This is the vote on the amendment.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Miller, I've got 49 votes for, 28 against and 5 abstentions.
So that's carried. The amendment's carried. Thank you. That's a good good number of votes there. Thank you. So that's been carried. So we now move back to the substantive item, which may have been amended, which has been amended now and voted on. So we'll now move to the recommendations which have been amended. Are there any members of the Shadow Authority who wish to comment on this item? I've got one speaker so far, Councillor Stone. Are we letting people in from the waiting room again, Paul, or not?
I spoke already, Chair.
Oh, you have done. My apologies. You're quite right, Councillor Stone. It's been a long day. Councillor Larratt.
Thank you, Chair. I did reserve my right to speak, so
you did do, yes.
I just wanted to say that I think we've got the panel have done a really good job. I think their benchmarking has been very thorough, very appropriate, and I think that what they've come up with is a full and sensible scheme. I do, however, say that I'm pleased with the amendment, because I did see some anomalies in that, particularly with the balance between the work of the individual chairs. I think licensing, for example, I thought was really too low, considering the amount of work that is undertaken, particularly in Northampton, often dealing with requests for licence reviews by the police and significant work in dealing with taxi drivers. So I did feel that that was well out of sync as far as the allowances was concerned. So I'm really glad that we've gone back to the an equal share, making it all equal. So I'm very happy about that. But I'm totally supportive of this proposal, Chair, and so I'm happy to second it and thank again everybody involved. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Larratt. Councillor Bearsworth, I think you've already spoken this, have you?
I just wanted to ask a question.
You may ask a question, yeah, that's fine.
How does the general public know how people vote? Is it printed out somewhere so they can see?
Paul, can you just explain how that's going to work, please, Paul Hanson?
Well, the same process as would happen in a face-to-face meeting at the moment. Councillors cast their vote and the meeting records the outcome of the.
Go on silent, Paul.
Chair, the process is the same as in a face-to-face meeting. Members vote and the outcome of the vote is recorded in the minutes. Zoom will record individual votes in a spreadsheet which we can access after the meeting. If members are particularly interested, they can request that from us.
That's very helpful. So members note that, please. Thank you, Mr. Paul.
Can the general public
Councillor Bearsworth, yes. Does that answer your question, Sally? Are you muted, Sally?
Oh, can the general public find out as well as councillors?
The information could be made available through the usual channels where members of the public can request information from the authority.
Okay, so please know that members of the public who want to get that information. Thank you, Paul. I'm now going to invite John Kay to respond to any questions he feels may not have been answered in the debate.
Thank you, Chair. I think, in fact, there was only one question I was asked. Obviously, we're aware of the climate and the circumstances in which this review is undertaken. The question was around the basic allowance and whether there was any other evidence to support the fact that the level of remuneration was a factor in helping a wider demographic to come forward. And I think the answer to that is yes. And I think that's the work the LGA have particularly done. And they have focused particularly on attracting young people, making decisions at an early age about whether they could make that decision. I think the reference has also been made to women as well, but it was particularly, I think, about young people and getting young people more interested in serving as a councillor. The other point, I think, related to that with that question as well, is about the other benchmarking we've been using. I think the point is there is that equally those that have come up with a level of basic allowance, like we are recommending to you, have also done by doing exhaustive degree of work like we have done. They haven't just put their finger up in the air and come up with a figure. So they indeed have done similar research. So I think that was the only question. And I think that would be the one I'd like to respond to, Chair.
Very kind, John, and thank you again for all your work you've done on this, you and your team. Thank you. I'm going to invite Adam Brown now to respond to the debate on the proposal. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. And with only 3 minutes and several councillors who need a response, I'm going to do my best not to filibuster myself. But first, I'll start off with Councillor Carol Billingham, who I think said it best. She took more than a couple of words out of my mouth when she identified correctly that too many councillors were focusing too much on meetings and the duty of councillors to attend meetings. The main focus of our responsibilities is in our casework, it's in our community work, it's in attending meetings within our villages, within our towns, and all of the work that we do to help members of the public, not only in these public-facing meetings. I applaud Councillor Meredith for his multitasking during this meeting and his continued hard work. It's to be admired, and it's really good that there's a rare moment of agreement between him and the Conservative group on at least some aspects of the proposal here tonight. Councillor Zoe Smith alleged that the allowances are inflated. I think that Mr. Cade and his working party have amply demonstrated that they're not inflated. They're well based in evidence and comparable to other authorities across the country. She does make some very important points though about making sure that meetings are accessible. They should certainly be accessible in terms of timing, in terms of making sure that people with families and people from all walks of life can get to those meetings. Both Councillor Sally Beardsworth and Councillor Chris Lofts made reference to the workload and the way that it would be shared in wards that are currently staffed by 3 county councillors. Whilst that's true on the county council side of things, certainly in my own bug book division, as it is under the county council, I work regularly with 6 district councillors. That work will be now in future shared amongst 3 unitary councillors. And actually, if you double the district workload and the allowances there, divide the county council allowance by 3 on the basic level, you get somewhere approximately in the region
1 minute remaining.
£40,000. I will make it, Mr. Chairman. Finally, Councillor Danielle Stone, she makes the point that it's important that councillors are paid properly, but then she refers back to her own amendment and says that it's important for councillors themselves to take a hit. The problem I have there is that under her amendment, only some councillors were due to take a hit. There was also provision for a significant pay rise for a newly created shadow cabinet and an inflated allowance for an opposition leader, pegged to the allowance of the leader of the council. I think, Mr. Chairman, it's a classic case, as ever on the left, of some animals being more equal than others. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. I'm now going to ask the Democratic Services Manager to take a vote on the proposal, please.
Chair, as before, we've got the poll ready. We're just moving members of the public into the waiting room so we can launch the vote.
Councillor Charlton can be admitted because he's the councillor.
Yeah, I just re-admitted him.
Yeah, thank you, Ashley. Thank you.
Error on our part.
And also George Candler, I suppose, he can be admitted as well.
I'll vouch for it.
You vouch for me. You identify me, Jonathan. Thank you.
I think that's it.
Okay, Chair, I'm going to launch the poll now. Members will have 20 seconds to cast their vote. This is the poll on the substantive item of members' allowances.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you. Okay, so 66% in favour, 29% against, 5% abstentions. In votes, 53 for, 23 against, 4 abstentions. That is carried. The proposal is carried. Thank you. We now move on to the new constitution for West Northamptonshire Council. So I'm going to invite Adam Brown, it's a busy night for you, Adam, to introduce the report and move the proposal. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Chairman. And yes, it is a busy night, but important issues. And in fact, the Constitution is one of the most important issues. And may I first start by paying tribute to all of my colleagues on our Task and Finish group, Councillor Sally Beardsworth, Councillor Charles Manners, Councillor Michael Clark, and Councillor Phil Larratt, who worked alongside me, as well as the lead officers who put in ample work to make sure that we got a Constitution to Council in a timely manner. And in fact, well before tonight's meeting, we had 2 trips to overview and scrutiny, and of course it went via the Shadow Executive as well. I pay particular tribute to Councillor Sally Beardsworth, in fact, who had to work alongside 4 Conservative members, but did so with great gusto and great commitment. And I think at the end of it all, we have before us a Constitution that, although it will undoubtedly be touched up, tweaked, improved as time progresses, is a document that will serve us well in its focus towards the public, ensuring that the public have a well-identified and a clear place at our meetings, clearly identified avenues to raise their concerns and to exercise their rights within our local democracy. And I would also draw members' attention to the proposed governance structure, in particular the localism that we've attempted to cement within our proposed planning committees. I know when I attended the members' briefing session on this issue, it was the proposals around the planning committees that attracted most attention from my colleagues from across all parties. And I would emphasise that we want to continue with the great work that we see from parish councils, with the contributions that we get from members of the public who are engaged and passionate about planning in their area. And we want to continue the localism in our planning regime. And that's important in a very basic way in terms of the logistics around members of those planning committees potentially having to learn multiple local plans before we put together a new local plan for West Northamptonshire. To ask possibly newly elected members and indeed any member going onto those committees to learn multiple local plans would be an immense undertaking. And so as far as possible, we wanted to limit that requirement, which is why we've got local plan area committees for the existing district and borough areas, which will ensure that most planning decisions continue to be taken by the most local members. It will be necessary in order to maintain that localism to remove the requirement for political balance solely on those local area committees, so that we can ensure that it's local members going on to those. I was about to say above that, but that would imply that there was a form of hierarchy. That's not the case. Alongside the local planning committees is a strategic planning committee, which will partly replace the Development Control Committee that currently exists at Northamptonshire County Council, but also look at the very large planning applications, both commercially and domestically, that we see coming forward. And I know that certain members have reservations on that front. They would like those largest planning decisions to continue to be taken at the most local level. However, I would just emphasise that we've all seen over the years the amount of friction that created when we have large planning applications on the borders of our district or borough areas. And as a representative of the Bugbrook division at the County Council, I know that the catchment area for Campion School crosses over the
1 minute remaining.
Crosses over that arbitrary boundary between Daventry District and South Northamptonshire. So any large housing development in one of the villages in the catchment area of Campion School would have a drastic impact and be of huge concern to people in both of those district areas. And the same can go for Wootton and Grange Park, between South Northamptonshire and the borough area, where Caroline Chisholm School has its intake. And there are other examples from across our region. So that's a little bit about the planning proposals. Overall, I think we've got an ample committee structure which places a strong focus on scrutiny. It will allow a huge number of members to be involved in scrutinising the work of our new council, and will also allow for pre-scrutiny. That scrutiny system will be a pressure valve that cabinet members can use to allow for feedback and scrutiny before decisions are taken, not simply retrospectively. And I hope that.
Right, thank you much indeed, Adam. You're out of time. I want to now ask Councillor Phil Larratt. You're going to second this, Councillor Phil Larratt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm pleased to second and reserve the right to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Larratt. I have now been notified of a proposed amendment to this item. So I'm now going to invite Councillor Peter Rawlinson to propose an amendment. And Peter, you have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I was expecting Adam Brown to include his alterations.
Point of order, Chairman. Sorry, I know I had my 5 minutes, so I slightly overran when I was talking about the planning aspect. I have put forward some minor amendments to the Constitution as a tidying up exercise, which have been pre-submitted to Democratic Services. So Councillor Rawlinson should not be overly concerned.
Thank you, indeed. Thanks, Adam. Back to Councillor Rawlinson again, please.
Thank you very much. I think councillors should consider themselves lucky this evening. I had originally proposed 6 amendments to the Constitution, and I'm grateful to Councillor Brown for giving them due consideration and accepting most of them into his alterations, or providing suitable assurances that they will be covered. This then leaves me one item which I still wish to propose, which is item 4.3, calling an extraordinary meeting to remove the leader. As it stands, the only way a leader can be removed is if the administration party decides to do it. While this does promote stability of the leadership of the council, it potentially can end up with 75% of the council being disillusioned with the leader and having no way of removing that person. With the slimmest of majorities, 24 people could keep the leader against the will of the other 69 councillors, and allowing a small cabal to control the council with no recourse to remedial action seems to be anti-democratic. Of course, party rules say that the leader of the majority party group is the leader of the council, which might provoke a constitutional issue for them. But we should be here for our residents, not slaves to party dogma. Just having the ability to call for the removal of the leader does not necessarily mean that it will be passed anyway. One hopes that if such an issue arose, the leader might consider this a warning shot across the bows and perhaps adopt a more conciliatory attitude in order to bring more of the council with them. And this would perhaps give rise to better decisions for our residents. Rules elsewhere in the Constitution will prohibit repeated attempts to depose the leader, and I am therefore very happy to propose that 4.4 is deleted and 4.3b is replaced with just submitted in the form of a requisition signed by not less than 1/3 of the members of the council, including members of 2 political groups. Thank you very much, Chairman, councillors.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor Rawlinson. Can I just go back to Councillor Brown? Are you going to move the amendments you made, which Councillor Rawlinson refers to?
If I may, please, Chairman, my apologies for
That's no problem at all.
overrunning on my 5 minutes.
Do you want to move them now?
Yes, please. I'll be extremely brief.
If you could be, then obviously I'll ask for a second on Councillor Rawlinson's amendment.
If I may, I just need to make it clear that these are, as Councillor Brown is the mover of the motion to adopt the constitution, these are alterations rather than amendments.
Alteration, my apologies, sir. Are you going to put them up on the screen, are you?
Yes, I can see them now, Mr. Chairman. So just to summarise quickly for members, we obviously had the issue at the last meeting of the guillotine falling and therefore necessitating the reconvening of the meeting as we're sitting through it tonight. To resolve the problem, we noticed upon review of the Constitution that there was actually a rule in there that would have almost required us to rush through business and possibly without debate. Upon consideration, we perceive that to be insufficiently democratic, and so what we are now suggesting is that the offending sections are removed, replaced with alternative provisions that you can see on the screen, and that if a meeting must be reconvened, then it is reconvened on the following Friday after the original meeting at 6:30 p.m, which is the constitutional start time of full council meetings.
Thank you. Thanks, Trustee Councillor Brown. Councillor Rawlinson, are you seconding these, are you?
Yeah, I'm very sorry. Councillor Miller, sorry, Chair. There are some other alterations.
Sorry, my apologies.
Brown was going to
on the alterations, Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much. So there's the next alteration is simply with regards to notice of questions. Councillor Rawlinson and others felt that it was important that greater notice is given of written answers to questions. However, as we didn't wish to overburden officers with last-minute work, in order to accommodate that notice of written answers, we proposed pushing back the notice period to 5 working days rather than the 3 working days currently under the Constitution. And finally, I think there's only a third one. This is a very, very minor amendment, which Councillor Rawlinson and I are both in agreement with. There is currently under the Constitution provision for motions received after the publication of the agenda, but within 5 working days of the next meeting of the council to be considered at that meeting. We're simply inserting a requirement that those items be circulated to councillors at least 24 hours in advance of the meeting. There were complaints last time that answers and certain other aspects that we were considering on the night weren't circulated far enough in advance for councillors who had working commitments and other commitments in their lives to be able to read through them. So this is a tidying up exercise to comply with that, and Democratic Services assure me that regardless of whether this amendment was in there, they would do their level best to comply with this anyway.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Brown. I understand Councillor Billingham is going to second your additional amendment, Councillor Rawlinson. It's Councillor Billingham.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, my intention is to second Councillor Rawlinson's proposed amendment concerning 4.3b and 4.4. I would reserve the right to say anything further later if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you, indeed. Right, okay. Can I just check, Councillor Brown, who's going to second? Is it you and Councillor Rawlinson proposing and seconding the amendments you've just gone through? The alterations.
I'll take any seconder who's happy to raise their hands.
I'm perfectly happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlinson. Appreciate that. Thank you.
Already.
So seconded by Councillor Rawlinson. And Councillor Billingham has also seconded the further amendment, and it's actually left the right to speak later if she wishes to. Catherine?
Yeah, just to note, Councillor Larratt had already seconded.
You had done, yes, I know.
Before we brought Councillor Brown back in.
Thank you for that.
Chair, my understanding was that I was seconding the alterations when I seconded the proposal. So
well, that's very helpful, Will. Yeah, that's good. Good man. It's a long day. Right, now we come on to more speakers. Councillor Daniel Stone. Danielle Stone.
Thank you very much. What a huge amount of work. I've got this great big doorstep sitting on my desk. So thank you to everybody who's been involved in that. And in lots of ways, I think it's quite a progressive document. My view would be that it's a working document, that it's not set in stone, that as things develop, as we get more experience in our new roles on a new council, there'll be further alterations and modifications of the document. I think the amendments that are being proposed tonight are in keeping with good practice, so I have no issues with that. I just wanted to make a couple of observations which I hope will be taken on as considerations for further development of the Constitution. One is, we need more clarity, it seems to me, about the role of opposition motions going to council. And I would ask that we consider how motions from whatever party that are passed at council, how are we going to manage that, and how are we going to track if indeed they have been implemented and what difference they've made. So I've been told tonight that maybe not an issue for the Constitution, but I think within the Constitution we need more clarity about the role of opposition motions and things like that. I don't think an allocation of 15 minutes for members' questions or public questions is anywhere near long enough. We sometimes have very complex and very contentious issues to deal with. So I would recommend that further consideration is given to that. In the Calla report, which has brought us all to this point, made it very clear that good governance demands robust opposition.
1 minute remaining.
And in the Calla report, the recommendation was that opposition members chaired overview and scrutiny. I think there are two groups in overview and scrutiny that I would like to see in the Constitution saying that opposition would chair, and that's the Finance Committee and then the Management Committee, which brings all three committees together. I think it's really important for good governance that that is put into our Constitution, as should also be the fact that we need an independent chair of audit. This isn't something that we can leave to chance. It needs to be within our Constitution as a matter of good practice. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard, Councillor. I've got 4 hands up. Are they all speak, or 5 hands, or 4 hands? Are we all speaking to the amendment, please? Councillor Ritchie, just to the amendment.
Chair, I'm speaking to the main part.
Okay, we'll come back to that.
I'll withhold.
Come back to that, Councillor Ritchie. I want to do the amendment first. Councillor Jane Birch, is the amendment?
No, I'm speaking to the substantive. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you. Councillor Beersworth, the amendment?
Substantive.
Thank you. Councillor Markham?
Thanks, yeah. I wanted to
speak to the amendment, Brian.
I wanted to speak to both.
Speak to the amendment, please.
Speak to the amendment first, and then I can continue on the substantive.
No, just do the amendment first.
Just do the amendment first.
Yeah.
I would like to say that I support the amendment and ask other people to support the amendment. I can't really understand why, if the other suggestions, changes were accepted, that the Councillor Rawlinson's amendment was not. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Meredith. I'll let you come back on this substantive shortly. So, Councillor Billingham, you reserve the right to speak on the amendment. Anything you wish to add?
Thank you, Chairman. I have nothing to add.
Thanks very much indeed. So I now ask Alan Brown, as the proposer, to reply to the debate on the amendment. You've got 3 minutes, Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I mean, obviously there hasn't been a lot of debate on the proposed amendment. Unfortunately, it's not one that I was prepared to accept, simply because whilst I appreciate the fact that Councillor Rawlinson thinks extensively about constitutional matters, and he's devoted great time to putting together the Shadow Authority's constitution, I do think that there are potential unforeseen consequences of the proposed amendment that he's put forward. namely the fact that with such a low threshold for 33% of councillors to call a no confidence meeting to remove a leader, it opens up the possibility that, that there will be an abuse of the system, that there will be superfluous and gratuitous no confidence meetings purely for party political purposes, and as such greater protections are needed to ensure the working stability of the council. I also think that it could create an unwarranted and unnecessary scenario whereby a very small group of members of the administration party are effectively handed a disproportionate level of influence over the leader, whereby they could threaten to support an opposition no confidence vote for totally unjustified reasons. And we need to be mindful of the fact that we are going to be going through a boundary review within our first term, and it opens up the scope for members who possibly see themselves on the way out, seeking to find ways to gain greater influence over the leader of the council. So, I appreciate that Councillor Rawlinson has put forward this amendment with democratic values first and foremost. But I think that if we take more time over this, if we refer it back to the Standards of Democracy Committee, that we will find a happy medium somewhere between the two, what is in the Constitution now and what Councillor Rawlinson is proposing. But I just think it leaves the system too open to abuse, and so as such, the shadow executive, the shadow leadership cannot accept the proposed amendment.
Thanks to you, Councillor Brown. Just noting again, the mover of the amendment has no right to reply at the conclusion of the debate. So on that basis, I now ask the Democratic Services Manager to take the vote on the amendment, please.
Thanks, Chair. Once again, we're just going to move members of the public to the waiting room so we can launch the poll. We'll be doing that shortly.
Wendy Randall, not
Yeah. Councillor Randall should be let in as a councillor. Yeah.
Just bringing her back in, Chair. Okay. Okay, Chair, I'm going to launch the poll now. This is the poll on the amendment proposed by Councillor Rawlinson. I'm going to launch the poll now. Members will have 20 seconds to cast their vote.
Twenty seconds is up. The result is 31 for the amendment, 46 against the amendment, 3 abstentions, which means the amendment is lost. 39% for, 58% against, 4% abstained. So we're going back now to the substantive item. The date will. Do you want now? Who wants to speak on the substantive item? We've got some speakers ready. Councillor Jane Birch, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to speak just very briefly as Chair of the Overview and Scrutiny for the Shadow Authority, and our work with the Governance and Constitution has played a significant part in the work that we've undertaken.
Yeah.
We were particularly focused on the future role of Overview and Scrutiny in the new authority. And we looked at the ways that scrutiny worked in the sovereign councils and recommended the best practice from those. The only regret for me is that the chair of Overview and Scrutiny is not necessarily going to be an opposition member. It's not good practice for the administration to mark its own homework, and I think you get a far better view of the proceedings of the council by the public if you do have the opposition councillors there in those posts. But having said all that, I would say that, wouldn't I? So I think it's been a very good search. Excuse me, my.
Okay, Councillor Birch. You're muted, Jane.
Yes, I'm sorry.
You're still muted. Thank you. Still muted.
No, this is going silly, isn't it?
Yeah, it keeps going on and off.
I'm sorry.
Anything else you wish to say, please? When you can say it, you're not muted. Okay, we'll move on. Councillor Beardsworth, please.
Thank you, Chair. That's quite a pity we haven't passed that amendment, because I believe Councillor Rowlinson, who actually led the governance for the shadow, which I was working with him with various members of the opposition and other parties, we actually thought he did an excellent job. And I think some of these things that he's pointed out about getting rid of the leader, I wish it had been around when I was a councillor, because I'm sure that would have been quite high on the agenda to get rid of some of the people that were leading us down the wrong path. But obviously everybody's a bit nervous about it, so I can understand that. But I really do, it was an awful lot of work we did, and I'm really glad that Councillor Royson's had a look at it and seen where we've missed, because you can't, with a document that's that big, you can't always get everything right. And when it goes to consultation and it goes out to other people who've got experience, we should listen to them. And it's a shame, really, you voted that amendment down, because I think it would have been very useful. And I think we could end up ruining the day that we haven't got that opportunity to get rid of a leader that's not doing a very good job. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Beardsworth. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Brown talked about engaging with people and engaging with parishes, but in this document, I don't actually see much substance there to that. To me, the big disappointment in this draft is the lack of any real commitment to localism. Now, right from the very first discussions we've had, the seminars that we had, the big meetings, a constant theme has been, how do we actually put our different districts together and at the same time have something that we can actually say is proper local democracy and local government. I'm aware of the discussions that have been had in saying that, look, this thing has got to be put off, we'll look at this later. But we're only a few weeks away from vesting day. And there's not even here a strong commitment that this thing has got to be part of the Constitution. I accept that there are planning committees there. I mean that's fine. I have got no problem with that. I have the problems that Councillor Brown has alluded to, of perhaps the decisions on big applications having a weaker local voice because of the way that they are done. I noticed that there's reference to community forums, but there's nothing here to suggest that these forums will actually be bodies that are part of a decision-taking process. They're not bodies that really are going to have a real purpose to them. I just feel that is incredibly weak. And I just feel that something should have been flagged up. Now, I go to a second small point. Section 4.1 allows 5 members to ask for an extraordinary meeting. And it says that the monitoring officer may call a meeting. Well, as you will know, Chair, in Daventry, the wording is that the appropriate officer will call a meeting if 5 people ask for it. Last month, the Conservatives in Daventry decided that they didn't need a meeting, they didn't think enough business. 5 members called the meeting, and the meeting went on for over 2 hours. We would have been furious if the monitoring officer had turned round and said that the monitoring officer had discretion of whether or not to accept the request for a meeting. I just feel that this is weak. We have got to sort of strengthen the role of members in this. A very final point that I would just like to make, and it's a fairly general one. This full council has been elected or will be elected to represent the people of West Northants. Consequently, it should be the paramount authority. Of course, it can't engage in executive decisions. It can't actually manage the work of the authority. But it at least must have the authority to intervene And as I see it, the fact that it's not in a position to instruct the executive to do something or not to do something, I think is a fundamental weakness. I think it is undemocratic. And I think that there needs to be some rebalancing between the full council and the executive.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Markham.
Sorry. Unfortunately, my eyes, I can't see whether the red lines across the...
We can see you, Brian, don't worry.
You can hear me. Thank you, Chair. First of all, I acknowledge putting together this constitution has been a great lot of work. And I have to say that I hope the new council, after it's elected, reviews it entirely again afterwards, because as Councillor Ritchie's just said, there's no real reference to localism. There's no real disaggregation is the word on this authority. There's no devolving power down in any mention to area committees. But more importantly, and I think the opportunity will be missed, many of us wanted a committee system for the new authority. The government decided that in the first year, we had to have an executive and leader system, and they appointed the leader. I think that we got to mention at this stage, and so that it goes forward to as a message to the new authority, those elected there, that actually considering at least, I would say implementing, but considering a move to the committee system would be a benefit. I mentioned two things why I think that. I don't think the decision that was made by a cabinet system to loan money to a football club would have been made if we had committees, all party committee system looking at. I don't think half of the decisions that were made by the executive, the cabinet and the leaders of the county council over the years, I don't think they were actually liked by many backbench Conservative councillors, but they were implemented under the cabinet system. And I think that this would not and could not have happened under the committee system. And so I'm hoping, I like the constitution.
30 seconds remaining.
Yeah, such as it is, it's a constitution for a shadow council. I hope that they rip it up and introduce localism, introduce committee system, and devolve power back down to the communities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Markham. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Chair. I'd also like to comment on the hard work that's gone into this. It's not a small piece of work, and I do agree that by and large it makes it a pretty accessible document, so there is lots to commend on that. There are a couple of areas that have been referred to earlier that I'd like to just mention. The engagement piece, particularly with members of the public. Councillor Stone mentioned the 15 minutes cut off for members of the public. I really don't think that's acceptable. It is, at the end of the day, an elected council. It's not our council. It belongs to the people in our areas. And I think we should definitely reconsider the amount of time that members of the public are allowed. I'm glad to see an amendment in regard to answers of questions being 24 hours in advance. To be honest, it was a complete debacle at the last meeting to not have received notification of answers to questions for members, and I'm glad to see that that's been amended. There's one area in the Constitution which I want to mention, which no one has really talked about tonight, although Councillor Zoe Smith did allude to this earlier on, and that is the issues in regards to members' behaviour. One of the factors that does, I'm sure, put people off from getting involved in politics, we've had the debate about allowances, it is what they see in terms of behaviour. And I do think that members would do well to refresh their memories on looking at the issue in regards to behaviour. A difference of opinion, a different policy, a different set of values or principles does not mean it is wrong. It means it's different. And there were quite a few phrases thrown around at the last meeting, which I felt were not respectful, simply because other groups had different views and opinions. So I hope that members can look deeply at the requirement for respect in terms of behaviours. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Councillor Auger.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just a matter of correction. Councillor Ritchie stated incorrectly that the Conservative Party cancelled the meeting on the 18th of February. That is not true. Daventry District Council cancelled it because there was no work to put before the council. That was the case at the extraordinary meeting on the 18th. There was no business to put before the council. There were simply motions and questions from the public that were put before, which the Conservatives fully supported and participated in. I think that clarification is really important. This statement was rather misleading. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Auger. Councillor Ian McCord.
Thank you, Chair. And I too wish to thank all those who've managed to get us to this point with the Constitution. I'm not entirely sure that at 57,000 words it is concise, but it is at least comprehensive. I absolutely agree with everyone that has spoken in terms of keeping this under review, and I certainly think we should be asking the new Standards and Governance Committee to immediately start a review after a couple of cycles to see. I take the points around what people say around questions and that, but there has to be a balance struck, and we'll only know when we get into it, between an orderly management of business. And my concerns are around that you'd spend a lot of time at the beginning of a meeting dealing with things, and then really important substantive items towards the end of the meeting would be rushed through in order to make sure that we maybe didn't come up against a 4.5 hour deadline if people didn't want to meet the following Friday night or things like that. So we need to keep these things under review, and as it pans out, I think we can do it. The point around wanting area committees and that type of structure, the simple matter is that with COVID, with everything that had to be done, that is just the one thing that's had to wait. And I also think it'll be much better that the 93 newly elected members take that, own that, and decide how much they wish to do it. I don't think anyone should read into that doesn't mean there's not a commitment to doing it. I think it's more a commitment of getting it right. To do it right, we'll need a lot of consultation with town councils, parish councils, Danny Moody and his organisation, right across the whole of the West, to make sure we get the combinations right, to look at what powers we can give them, also to look at what budgets we can give them, because certainly advice I've had from people who've done this successfully is if you can find a way to give them budget, then you can find a way to make them much more successful. And there's just one or two other things. Some members are saying about the way in which the executive and the council, they're quite right. I have my reservations about that too, but that is the law. And I certainly would love to see a position when something was called in and sent to council, council took over the decision. Unfortunately, it's not legal. Unfortunately, you can't have that. But certainly, we have to live within the parameters that we've been set, and we can't have perfection, but let's not let perfection become the enemy of the good. And I think what we have is good. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor McCord. Councillor, you seconded it. You reserve the right to speak. So here's your chance, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I first of all say my thanks to Adam for the way he's chaired this group and brought us all through. Of course, I also thank all the other members of the group and the officers who've been involved. But I just wanted Adam's contribution, which has been significant to this process, to be noted. Chairman, the Constitution is a living document. A lot has been said tonight about keeping it under review. That will happen. If you look, we've set up a Standards and Democracy Committee, and that it is the responsibility of that committee to keep the Constitution under constant review. So any issue can be picked up on a regular basis and addressed. I think, for example, the amendment that was defeated tonight, there's perhaps substance there that can go to the committee and be discussed by the committee, and a way through found that everybody can sign up to. I do agree with Councillor Stone on the issue of progressing motions and knowing what's happened to them, and they don't just come to council, get passed on and get lost. I think we do need something to keep us updated as to understanding what's happened with those motions, and there is a precedent for that, and perhaps we can look into that. The independent chair of audit, we have discussed that within the group, and that is something certainly the group support, and I think that would be a recommendation of the group that that's the road we go down. I think localism is a very big issue, and working with our diverse communities is also important, and I think that there are some good things going on in sovereign councils at the moment, and I don't think there's any intention to stop those happening.
1 minute remaining.
So those will continue and obviously be reviewed as things progress, as will the prospective area committees and how they would operate. I'm particularly keen to see the parish clerks and chairmen positively engaged, because that has brought so many benefits, particularly in Northampton. I know it has in South Northamptonshire as well. So I do want to see that continue, and I think we do need to address that as soon as we can after the elections. But Mr. Chairman, I think we've got to a good point, and I'm happy to support the constitution as presented and amended.
Thank you, Councillor Larritt. I'm now going to invite Councillor Brown to respond to the debate on the proposal.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'd like to thank all of the members who have contributed to this debate, because I feel that it's been positive and constructive. And if the members who have spoken in this debate are elected and they bring that passion for such matters to the new council, then I think that this document will evolve, it will improve, and we'll have a better council for it at the end of it all. There were lots of comments, so I can't recap them all. I'd like to thank Councillor Stone for her praise. Both she and Councillor Birch referenced the potential for an opposition member chairing scrutiny. I think that Councillor Mick Scrimshaw at the County Council has demonstrated that if you get the right person doing the job, then it doesn't matter what party they're from. He's done an admirable job at the County Council, but equally, when I went to scrutiny, I heard wholesome praise for the scrutiny arrangements at Northampton Borough Council, which of course is chaired by Councillor Jamie Lane, who is an administration member. So it's about having the right person in there, and I'm sure that if an opposition group were to put forward someone who is passionate about scrutiny, who's qualified to undertake that role, then there's a conversation to be had. Councillor Ritchie spoke about the lack of localism, and he mentioned a lack of a strong commitment. I apologise if the document comes across that way, because it certainly isn't the intention. And if I have one major regret about the Constitution, it's that we didn't manage to get that ultimate commitment to area panels in there. But the reason for that ultimately was that Councillor Ritchie may recall that I spoke a lot about the Cornish model when I came to scrutiny originally. But I then subsequently had a meeting with Danny Moody at NCALC, and it became apparent that actually just copying and pasting the Cornish model would not necessarily be right for Northamptonshire. And so it's absolutely vital that when we attempt to put in place some localism, that we do it in conjunction with the town and the parish councils, that we do it in conjunction with the diverse community groups that are represented across West Northamptonshire. We do it with them, we don't do it to them. And that requires a comprehensive consultation. And I would just like to reassure everybody of the passion that I have for localism, and for ensuring that if I am elected, that I will be able to drive through a scheme of localism that is right for Northamptonshire, and that really does place power in the hands of the people that we're here to represent. I think that's absolutely indispensable. Just finally, Councillor Brian Markham mentioned the committee system. We've left it open for the new council. If we'd made that decision now as unelected members to that new council, we would have locked them in for the full term. That's why we haven't made the decision. They will have that decision. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. I'm now going to ask the Democratic Services Manager to take the vote on the proposal, please.
Chair, as before, we'll just move members of the public into the waiting room and we'll get ready to launch the poll.
Randall needs to come back in.
Okay, Chair, I'm going to launch the poll now.
Councillor Zoe Smith.
Oh, sorry, we'll get Councillor Smith back in. Thank you, Chair. Okay, I'm going to launch the poll now on the substantive recommendation. Members will have 20 seconds to cast their votes.
Right, so that's a clear majority in favour of the proposal to adopt the Constitution. 87% or 69 votes for, 1 against, and 9 abstentions. So that is carried. Thank you. We now move on to item 14, interim period appointments and indemnity for officers and members. I'm going to invite Councillor Ian McCord to introduce the report. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. The report is reasonably self-explanatory, and I will move the recommendations as set out at 3.1 A to F. A, B and C deal with member side of the interim arrangements for the council, and D, E and F more or less deal with the officer side. So D, E and F, if you want to be safe and legal, I think it's a good idea that our officers have the necessary indemnities, and members should note what's going to happen in the period from the 1st of April to the 11th of May, 4 days after the election, which is the legal point at which anybody who is not standing for election or hasn't been elected or has either by their choice or the will of the electorate, that is the point at which you legally retire. So members can see what's going to happen in terms of the governance, if there's a need for planning committees to meet, what will happen, if there's a need for the standards committee, if there's a need for the licensing committee, senior appointments committee, it's all as laid out. I won't take up any more time, Chairman. I'll move the recommendations.
Thank you, Dean. Councillor McCord. Councillor Nunn, you going to second this?
Yes, happy to second. This just ensures, as the leader says, safe and legal. It keeps the wheels on the bus during that month until the election comes along. I think it's an essential step, so I'm very happy to second it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Councillor Nunn. Are there any members who wish to speak on this item, please? Please show your hands now. There don't appear to be, so I'll ask, there's nothing to respond to, Councillor McCord, so I'll go to ask Democratic Service Adventure to take a vote on the proposal.
Thank you, Chair. As before, we just move members of the public into the waiting room and I will launch the poll.
Thank you.
Okay, Chair, I've launched the poll. Members will have 20 seconds to cast their votes.
That's time up. 73 in favour, 1 against, so that's carried comfortably. Thank you much indeed. We now move on to item 15, appointment of independent persons. I'm going to invite Councillor Adam Brown to introduce the report and move the proposal. You have 5 minutes, Councillor Brown.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and members will be relieved to hear that this is one of the last times you'll hear from me this evening. The report is self-explanatory. I'm sure the monitoring officer will be happy to take any questions that members have. I would just like to insert a further recommendation, and I have to take Councillor Stone's counsel on this if I get my wording incorrect. But the additional recommendation that I'm proposing is that the membership of the panel be approved within the first 12 months with the objective of increasing the diversity of members of the panel.
Thanks indeed, Councillor Brown. Do you have a second? Is it Councillor Larritt again?
Happy to second, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, indeed, Councillor Larritt. I'm now inviting anyone who wants to speak on this item, please, to show their hands now. Councillor Stone.
Just very quickly, Chair, to say that I, of course, totally approve of the alteration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for that clarification. So we now move to the vote on the, I think Adam Brown, nothing to reply to this, really, is there?
No comment, Chairman.
It seems to be supportive. So I want to now move to the vote on the substantive item, but the amendment also, which you touched upon. I now ask the Democratic Services Manager to take the vote on that proposal, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we've moved members of the public to the waiting room, so I'm just going to launch the poll. Members will have 20 seconds to cast their vote.
Thank you. Well, that's our first 100% tonight in favour. 75 people voting for, none against, and no abstentions. That's carried. Thank you very much indeed. Now we move on to motions on notice, item 16. And before I ask Councillor Ritchie, sorry, it's been proposed by Councillor. Sorry, Councillor Ritchie, you want to raise a point of order? Is that right, sir?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I want to raise a point of order because a motion that was submitted for this meeting doesn't appear on our agenda. I had an explanation from the monitoring officer well over 2 weeks ago, but the information that I requested from her to give justification for her decision, I have never received. There will always be cases where the monitoring officer takes a decision that is at least contested by members, but I feel that ultimately council ought to be able to decide what its view is on whether a motion is acceptable or not. In this case, my feeling was that the motion was certainly, it was addressed to this council, it was not addressed to the returning officer. We have submitted ample evidence to suggest that it was a perfectly proper motion for this council to adjudicate. In support of our position, we put in our evidence even information from a former chief executive of Northampton Borough Council, who advocates that, or at least when he was active, advocated that that councils should be engaged in encouraging the participation of electors in elections. I just think that this is an issue. We had a similar motion that was debated not that long ago by, or at least was accepted for debate. My apology, I'm recollecting, it was actually debated. At least a similar one to our motion from the Liberal Democrats was accepted and debated in Daventry. We see no reason why this should not have been accepted. And I think that for the future, we need to have some process by which there can be some sort of view that is taken by the council on whether or not motions pass the test of being acceptable to the council.
Thank you, Councillor Richard. Just want to say, from my perspective as chair, I've been advised the monitoring officer that in accordance with Appendix 2 to the Shadow Authorities Procedure Rules, the subject of this motion comes solely within the powers, duties and responsibilities of the Shadow Executive Committee. In accordance with the provisions of this part of the Constitution, it shall, when it has been moved and seconded, stand referred to the Shadow Executive Committee to determine. In accordance with the provisions of the Constitution, there should be no amendments and no vote on this motion. I was going to say, do you want to add anything, Monitoring Officer?
I think, Chair,
I'm just asking Monitoring Officer.
Sorry, I'm a bit confused as to which one you're talking about.
We're talking about 16A, the motion on notice.
Councillor Ritchie's motion or another motion, because it's
just
not
on Councillor Randall's motion.
Oh,
Councillor
right,
Ritchie's raising a point
yes,
of order
that's correct.
about the items. Yeah.
Yes, Councillor Ritchie's, yes. I'm not responding to Councillor Ritchie, I'm responding in relation to this latest issue. Yes, it is a shadow executive matter and therefore be referred to the shadow executive.
Thank you, Steve. Thanks for that clarification. Councillor McCord. Councillor Ritchie, do you want to come back, sir? You're muted, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're talking about two separate motions. There may have been more than one that was not allowed. My motion was disallowed because it was felt to be interfering with the work of the returning officer, and these were the grounds in which we were told that it could not be accepted. But the resolution did not ask for action by the returning officer, it asked for action by the council.
Thanks, Steve, for that clarification. Councillor Zoe Smith, is it, what point do you want to raise, please?
On that motion, I think two things, one of which...
Are you talking about the motion now, are you, or are you talking about the...
I'm talking about the point of order that Ken Ritchie has made as the would-be seconder of the motion that was rejected. I think it's really important that we look at the way that we handle democracy. There are too many motions being rejected under dubious grounds, not coming to the council. There are too many motions that are taken out of the power of the council, no matter what party they're from. All councillors should have the opportunity to, particularly in this one. The motion that was rejected was regarding engaging members of the public with the election process by making sure that their options were clear. It was going to cost the taxpayer nothing and ensure that during a COVID pandemic, that people were given the full information on how to exercise their democratic rights safely through a postal vote. So I think we really need to re-examine this issue. We need to re-examine how we manage democracy, and we need to ensure that councillors are not silenced before motions even make it to the council.
Thanks indeed, Councillor Smith. I'll just remind you, Councillor Smith, that we have 3 weeks left of the shadow authority, and I'm sure when the new authority is set up following the elections, all these matters will be fully debated by the new council. Councillor McCord, do you want to say anything?
Right, Chairman, I was just going to move that we move actually on to item 15.
Just going to move on to the motions now,
discussing things. They've obviously put in a motion of which probably 55, 60, 70 members on this call know nothing at all about. It was struck out by the monitoring officer from what I could piece together from their conversation. That to me is the end of it. That is the role of the monitoring officer. If you don't like it, I'm terribly sorry about that. But can we move on to item 15, please, Chair?
It's my item 16, actually. Thank you. Councillor Patel? No? Okay, thank you. Right. Councillor Randall. You're proposing this motion. I just want to make it clear there'll be no vote on this motion, and I'll allow a period of 50 minutes for debate on this motion once it's been proposed and seconded. So, Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I don't know whether the motion will be put on the screen and then I talk around the motion, because I don't want to use my time up reading it out. Can that be done? So at least the members of the public will be able to see what the motion was when they come to watch it.
Yeah, the motion was on the agenda for the meeting, but I will find that and screen share it while Councillor Randall proposes it, if you bear with me.
Okay, fine.
Right, thank you. My motion this evening is for this council to have an anti-poverty strategy. I really hope that you will agree to this motion this evening. That is, as there's so much scope that will help people, pull people out of poverty, as well as preventing others slipping into it. I'm sure that we've all come across people who have fallen on bad times and have been plunged into poverty through no fault of their own. There are many reasons why people fall into poverty. It could be redundancy, illness, domestic violence or abuse, breakup within the home, 0-hour contracts. When submerged into poverty, residents can experience multiple disadvantages: unemployment, low income, poor housing, poor healthcare, barriers to learning, sport, recreation and culture. Child poverty is growing at an alarming rate. It's averaging around 30% in West Northamptonshire. After speaking to some head teachers, they are extremely concerned that the percentage that isn't recorded, and they refer to those as jams, and this is short for just about managing. They are just over the threshold for claiming any benefits and are experiencing poverty like never seen before. Many in poverty are working, but they have 0-hour contracts. This means there's no job stability.
1 minute remaining.
They can't get on the rental. You see them, they're living in their cars, even though they're working. They're living hand to mouth. The ones that have got somewhere to live, they don't know if they're going to have enough days' work to keep a roof over their head, let alone put food on their table and clothes on their back. When you have a fair wage for a hard day's work, you see productivity increase and sickness decrease. More money in people's pockets can play its part in improving the local economy. This is why we hope that this council will agree to becoming a living wage employer and to work with contractors who also pay the living wage. The scope of an anti-poverty strategy is huge and something that we can keep adding to and improving on. It will look to stop people becoming poor, and if they are in poverty, it will look to help them getting out.
Thank you, Councillor Randall. Seconded by Councillor Ashraf.
Thank you, Chair. I too wish to rise to agree for this motion to be agreed by the councillors. But before that, I'd like to say I agree with Councillor Randall. We need to have an anti-poverty strategy. But I'm going to talk about my residents in St James. Like other households, the people in St James have been really badly affected by 10 years austerity and by the COVID crisis. Many are struggling to make ends meet. This is not how it should be. We should be working to make our communities thrive. We need a holistic approach that helps meet the skills gap, that brings in permanent, well-paid jobs that helps people maximise their income. I am also talking here as a BAME councillor. You will be aware that BAME communities have been disproportionately affected by job losses, service cuts and COVID. There are complex reasons for this. The inequalities in our communities have been brought into sharp focus by the COVID crisis. Poverty affects how people live. Have they got enough gas and electricity to keep the house warm, to cook, to do the washing, to bathe their children? Is there enough money to feed the children, or do they have to rely on food banks? I rise to vote for this motion, so please can I ask everyone to vote for it? Thank you.
Many thanks indeed, Councillor Ashraf. Just to remind members now, there's a maximum period of 15 minutes for the debate. I've got 4 speakers so far. Councillor Jane Birch.
Thank you, Chair. What are the effects of an anti-poverty strategy? It could improve earnings for low-income households, reduce the housing benefit to claimants, reduce unemployment and young people not in employment, educational training, a reduction in fuel poverty, help people on low income get online and develop the digital skills needed to search for jobs. They could complete online applications and access public service support initiatives. It would improve health for the low-income residents and include cookery skills classes and free swimming lessons for children of low-income families and affordable childcare. An anti-poverty strategy could also enhance early intervention in many of these areas and would avoid high-cost services when a crisis point is reached. We have many high-skilled and experienced partners in the voluntary sector, and perhaps they reach the people that the official borough services are unable to engage with. We can support our local libraries where all generations can find information and activities at no cost. We must support these voluntary organisations and enable them to work on a productive partnership with our authority to achieve the best outcomes from residents. So I think the anti-poverty strategy would actually enhance hugely the statutory services that we offer. It could help the voluntary sector work better with the people and avoid the situations in the first place that bring people and families into poverty. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Birch. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say initially, without wasting much of my time, but I find it really quite difficult that we're just cutting somebody off when the 3 minutes ends, we could have at least allowed them to finish their sentence. I understand we're trying to restrict timings, but I don't think it's very fair or very kind way of conducting business.
I'll tell you why I do that, Councillor Roberts. It's because in the past, when someone goes over time, then everyone else people said, well, I need the same amount of time. We have a certain amount of time. The last meeting went on far too long. So I'm trying to manage it in a fair way that everyone has the same opportunity in terms of time. And therefore, they have to, as Councillor Brown earlier, he realised himself he'd gone over on one part of his answer. I think it's the only way to be fair. And I think that, I'm just making that point as chairman. I'm just trying to be fair. So whilst you may not think it's right to be fair, that's my view, and I'm chairing the meeting.
No problem, Chair. I don't think it's not right to be fair. I just didn't think it was very nice to cut somebody off. So I'll move on to what I've got to say. An anti-poverty strategy is so important. It's absolutely imperative that a council, particularly of this size, has a strategy in place. In order to understand poverty, it's imperative that we understand the root causes, and anti-poverty strategy enables us to do that. The best strategies have the commitment from all. They have commitment from the leaders and those at the highest level. So it's imperative that the executive support an anti-poverty strategy. It allows this council to take responsibility and accountability for poverty in its area. And it allows it to speak up for the people that are experiencing that poverty. A strong strategy allows facilitation and coordination and consensus building. And that's clearly stated throughout all of the expert reports on the reasons for having an anti-poverty strategy. The MPI and Joseph Rowntree Foundation's reports detail lots of reasons to have it. It shows a political commitment to the reduction of poverty in our area. And it allows us to get together and say, no, we're not going to have this. We're not going to allow this to happen. And we're going to make a difference in our area.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Stone.
Thank you very much. Poverty is a structural issue, and therefore it's got to have a structural response. And I think if there's one single thing that the new authority can usefully do is to follow the examples of other local authorities who have got an anti-poverty strategy. Having large numbers of pensioners, large numbers of children, large numbers of households living below the poverty line, which is what we're facing at the moment, does nobody any good. It sucks the life out of our local economy, it sucks the life out of our communities, and it isn't necessary. If we have a situation in the council where all departments are required to reflect on their own practice, is their practice pushing people into poverty? Is their practice making life worse for people who are living in poverty? Or is their practice stopping people becoming poor? Those are the kind of actions that we could be taking as a local authority. It will make sure that we don't work in silos and we're not working against each other, but we're working together to make sure that people in our communities thrive. If people in our communities thrive, what happens? What happens is that demand grows. It means the local economy grows. It means that firefighting and children's services is ameliorated, it lessens. It means that the burden on adult social care is reduced. It is a really, really important preventative way of ensuring the health of our communities and the health of our local economy. It's a simple thing to do. There's loads of help out there to help us do it. Lots of local authorities have already done it. For me, it is the biggest single most important thing that we can do. We have in Northamptonshire, there was over 47,000 children living in poverty before COVID. Before COVID, those are the county's figures. We can't allow that situation to endure without intervention. Please do consider this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Councillor Beersworth.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be brief. In a civilised society, it's wicked that we've got so many children, especially, living in poverty. This is the way forward. We need to bring all the agencies together, the council, to have a policy to make sure that people, don't live in poverty. We can bring people out of poverty. It's been happening in other countries. If you look at Sweden, other places like that, they have a wonderful way of supporting people. And children shouldn't be. It was embarrassing to see that Marcus Rashford had to come along and make the government give the free meals to children in the school holidays. And he understood what it's like living in poverty because he'd been in that situation himself. Maybe none of you have been in that situation, and it may be difficult for you to understand, but it's something that we really need to do, and do it very quickly to help people, because it's going to get worse after the pandemic because so many people will be losing jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Beersworth. Councillor Adam Brown.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to say that I think in the last, we should be more aware than ever just how inextricably linked health and wealth are. And it's a simple yet brutal fact that the poorer people within our society are those most at risk of falling ill, of dying prematurely, and of suffering the very worst consequences of whatever pandemics or viruses or illnesses are circulating at any given time. And so whilst it's not my portfolio and I can't speak on behalf of the cabinet, I can only give my personal view. I certainly think that we do need to take a strategic approach to providing whatever assistance West Northamptonshire Council can to alleviating poverty wherever it can. And so I would just like to applaud opposition members for putting this on the radar. I think it requires careful consideration, and I would encourage those opposition members who have spoken tonight, who have brought this motion, to continue their engagement in the issue when it goes to the Shadow Executive and as it goes forward, if indeed it does, within West Northamptonshire Council. This is something that affects every one of our wards. It's not just the case that poverty affects the very centre of Northampton. There are areas of deprivation, and there are children going to school hungry in even the wealthiest of wards within West Northamptonshire. So I would encourage all members to engage with this issue, and hopefully together we can make a difference.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Roberts.
Very briefly, Chair, I just wanted to second comment on Councillor Brown's commentary about this is not just a Northampton issue. This is absolutely a West Northamptonshire issue. Well, it's a whole of Northamptonshire issue, but having the privilege to sit on the Food Aid Alliance group that looks at a lot of these issues, there are every single area, small village, large town, are all impacted by poverty, and COVID may be a natural phenomenon, but poverty certainly isn't. So we absolutely need to take this on board, and I applaud Councillor Brown for his hopeful support of it, and I agree wholeheartedly with him. This is a West Northamptonshire issue.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Roberts. I was going to ask for a member of the Shadow Executive to actually respond. Councillor McCord's got his hand up, so can you do that on behalf of the Executive? Councillor McCord.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this will stand referred to the Shadow Executive. The Shadow Executive can have a discussion on it at a later date. The only point I would make is that we have, at the beginning of this meeting, albeit that was a fortnight ago, put a practical proposal down in order to help those on low wages in work with the local council tax reduction scheme. And everybody, with the exception of Councillor Brown that has spoken, voted against that practical proposition put forward by the administration to reduce the amount of council tax that was being paid by the low paid in work. The best way to get to begin to address any of these issues is to put real money into people's pockets and stop taking it out. And I suspect a large number of the people who spoke also have voted in Northampton Town Council to take £50 a year out. We actually put in a lot of money into people's pocket directly from the budget proposals, and practically everybody that spoke earlier voted against that proposal. So I would like to practice what I preach, and I would actually ask others to also try and practice what they preach. When there were sensible proposals put forward, the dogma of party politics got in the way, rather than what we're seeing now. So we can all come at this from whatever position we want, but it is an undeniable fact that those who voted to put money in were from the administration. Those who voted to take money out were not. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Court. Councillor Chan, how long have we got left?
Minutes left.
How many minutes? Sorry.
3 minutes.
Thank you. Councillor Ritchie, 3 minutes. There's 2 speakers.
I just wanted to intervene and say that I know that Councillor McCord knows that we're getting close to an election. And the opposition did not vote against measures that were going to help poorer people. It voted against a budget with a whole package of measures. And Councillor McCord is not as stupid as not to know that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. You covered most of what I was going to say there, but Councillor McCord, we voted against a whole item, not an individual matter. And if you read the motion, this is about an anti-poverty strategy. You can nod away as much as you like at me. This is about an anti-poverty strategy, and it's about, as a council, accepting that we need an anti-poverty strategy to work forward. And this has got nothing to do with electioneering or the dogma of party politics. I've been saying this since I was elected in 2018, so it has nothing to do with the election. So I'd ask you to be a little bit more respectful about the meaning and the feeling behind the position that we've got.
Thanks very much indeed for that, Councillor Roberts. Right, I think we've done our time now, so I'm going to Ian McCord has responded on behalf of the Shadow Executive. So I'm now saying the motion will now stand referred to the Shadow Executive. That motion will now go forward. We come on to item 16B, motion proposed by Councillor Roy regarding food poverty. And again, it's coming back to the point again that apart from the proposer and seconder, there'll be a 15-minute debate on this item once the proposer and seconded this item, which again will be referred to the Shadow Executive in line with the Constitution. So, Councillor Roy, you have 3 minutes to make the proposition. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. As a Labour and Cooperative Councillor, I'm pleased to be proposing this food justice motion. As local councillors, we may not always agree with what the root cause of poverty are, but hopefully this motion we can agree on some of the solutions to food poverty. In our new Shadow West Northamptonshire Authority, we have the opportunity not only to look at those in need of food justice, but we look at also the food needs of low-paid agricultural workers and the way that our food is produced. This also means as an authority doing our bit to ensure that the people involved in producing our food are treated fairly. This presents a chance for key players like the NFU and local farmers to be involved in this approach. This is an opportunity not just to make sure that people have enough healthy food to eat, but promoting local produce at a time when it's difficult for local farmers and those in specialist industries. Here's something that could be used to promote the purchase and consumption of Northamptonshire produced food, helping local farmers and local food producers. Other councils that have gone down this route are Medway, which have introduced a food partnership. Suffolk had pledged to introduce a food partnership and recruited a council officer to promote its work, and Devon. So many have come together to provide emergency relief during lockdown. And this is so commendable, but actually we need to plan to begin to move away from emergency support to empowering people. In part, this can be done by the uplift in universal credit, but it's also about healthy food education, identifying and addressing food deserts where it's hard to buy healthy food. Part of it's also about encouraging people to grow their own, which is proven to help people's well-being and with education about healthy food. This must also include the promotion of food to the most in need by
1 minute remaining.
Healthy Start vouchers to pregnant women and young families, a scheme where in much of our authority there is less than 50% take-up. I want to praise local initiatives like the Food Aid Alliance and also things like the Sustainable Food Place Working Group, which are working to get accreditation as a recognised place. This is about so much more. A key driver of food waste stems from how detached we are from our food, how our food is grown. It's about getting local people onto the land, reconnecting us with where our food comes from and how it's produced. This produces a virtuous circle where communities are working with farmers to minimise food waste on farms and reconnect with the land.
Thank you, Councillor Roy. I understand that Councillor Kelly is going to second this. Councillor Kelly, you have 3 minutes.
Hi, thank you. I'll reserve my right to speak after the debate, please.
If you wish to, that's fine. Thank you. I've got one speaker lined up so far, Councillor Roberts, Emma Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. This motion goes directly alongside the previous motion and completely works in harmony with it. It allows us to look at alternatives, and it allows us to work with the projects that are already running and give a commitment from the West Northamptonshire Authority that we will be committed to the Sustainable Food Place, and we will maintain that connection as a new authority as we move forward. It also commits to the Food Aid Alliance project, which works wonderfully to harness the mapping of food poverty across West Northamptonshire. When we talk about funding and funding that's been provided for poverty or food aid or anything else that's related to COVID, we've got cut-off points. Those cut-off points are starting to come in now. We might be rising ourselves out of a pandemic, and I truly have everything crossed that we do. But we don't know where the next set of funding is coming from. We don't know where the rest of the money is coming from. And this poverty isn't about to go away. It's not about to disappear as the COVID grants disappear. It's still going to be there. And this motion, along with the anti-poverty motion, allows us, again, as an authority to say, do you know what, we're going to look for that, we're going to find that, and we're going to support our county. We're going to make sure that as a council, we are at the forefront of determining that strategy and that food place organisation. So I wholeheartedly, once again, hope that the executive choose to support this motion.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Stone.
In a way, it would be inconceivable, wouldn't it, Chair, to think that a local authority would dismiss all these lovely ideas and the strategy embedded in there that really takes seriously how we are going to deal with food shortages. That's what we're talking about, aren't we? We're talking about households that have got nothing in the cupboard. We are talking about children who are going to sleep hungry. We're talking about children going to school with empty bellies and so they can't learn. And, you know, we've got a hugely rural part of our local authority area where lots of food is being grown. We've got lots of experience in different voluntary organisations, but not just the food banks. The food banks have been absolutely tremendously important over the COVID crisis, but we've got lots of other organisations that are looking at how to reduce food waste and how to feed people on food that would have been very good food that would have been thrown away. There's a huge amount that we can do. And it is absolutely unthinkable that we could go from the experience of watching all of this unfold in front of our eyes during the COVID crisis, when we've seen this huge, enormous growth in the need for food banks, and sit back and not want to do anything about it. So I really, really hope the shadow exec takes this really seriously and comes forward with some plan for how to implement it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stone. Councillor Kelly, do you want to, a second, do you want to come back and say anything now?
Yes, please, thank you.
Yeah.
Modern day hunger is unacceptable. And as most of the speakers have already echoed, I would like to echo what they've actually been their inputs. Having to see this, you know, food poverty day in, day out on a daily basis is extremely heartbreaking. It's been there, food poverty has been there before the lockdown, but it's obviously increased during the pandemic. Lots of people have lost their jobs. Lots of people have been put in furlough, and we can really see the struggle around us. Celebrities are seen, footballers have seen, noticing, you know, the food poverty around us, and it's a shame for them to do something and for us to sit back and not doing anything. It really gets to me, sorry. It's absolutely unacceptable that we sit there and do not anything to help those are vulnerable, especially the young children. Positive food can change and enable through the grassroots of action and innovation. As a new town council, let us build that vital knowledge and the skills and capacity to make the change happen. We have the opportunity to address it. Please, let's address the problem now.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Thank you. Is there a member of the Shadow Executive who wants to respond to this motion, please?
I'm happy, Chair, to say that.
Thanks, Councillor McCord. Yeah.
I see Councillor De Savage wishes to speak, but it's not a member of the.
Oh, my apologies. Yeah, Councillor De Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a point of clarification. I know that Councillor Kelly has just indicated that it's a new town council. Was that a sort of slip, or was that a? I'm not entirely sure if her points are raised for a town council or for the town council or for West Northants. Just a matter of clarification, please, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, Councillor Kelly, can you just make that point clear for Councillor Gonzalez?
For the West Northants, sorry.
For West Northants. Thank you. Councillor McCord.
Thank you, Chair. Well, again, this will stand referred and executive can discuss the points made. But I would come back to the point that I made earlier. When there was a practical, sensible solution or proposal put forward that would put money into people's pockets and help the lowest paid, every speaker voted against. We did something practical. We've had plenty of heartfelt talk about trying to help people on low paid and putting money into their pockets. That's exactly what we did when we brought forward a proposal to reduce the council tax burden, particularly in Northampton Borough, from 31% to 20%, giving a third cut. And they voted against. Fact.
Thank you, Councillor McCord. We've got 4 speakers now. How long have we got left, please, Councillor Chown?
8 minutes left.
8 minutes left. Thank you. Councillor Baker.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to clarify a few points, and obviously in my position of lead member for children, I'm fully aware of the situation and very sad situations of a lot of families in our county. And I just wanted to bring forward and remind members that it was actually the county council and myself who put forward the paying for free school meals during the school holidays for our children in Northamptonshire. We paid from them out of the county council budgets. And we also have got permission from the 2 new unitary councils that this will be ongoing through the Easter holidays and the summer holidays as well. And they will share the cost of paying for those free school meals until we get out of this pandemic situation and people can go back to their normal working life. And we can then have lots of proposals put forward to see how we are going to address the balance later on when we see the situation that we end up being in. But I'm fully aware of the situation of children in our county. I have done personally as much as I possibly can to make sure that these children do not go hungry in my power, and make sure that they at least have their £15 a week during the school holidays so that they are able to get food.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Baker. You obviously understand the situation very well. I'm hoping that Councillor McCord does. And we were talking earlier about council allowances and how people conduct themselves. And you actually do come across quite aggressive, Councillor McCord. I'm sure you don't mean to seem that way, but I've had members of the public saying that you come across that way. But I'm sure that you are very compassionate and you understand, you know, the poverty that is around us. And I still do take offence to what you're saying about how the opposition voted. And there were some things in there that we might agreed with and some things are not. And also on the council tax, you know, we were led to believe it was 4.99%, but that isn't so, is it? Because that's an average. It's not 4.99% for South Northants, Northamptonshire district, as I understand it. It's much nearer to 10. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Randall. Councillor Roy.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, we've got 5 minutes left.
5 minutes left. Thank you, Councillor Roy.
Just wanted to address Councillor McCord's statements. I was quite concerned about some of your statements at the previous meeting, the first part of this meeting, when you made reference to, what is it, virtue signalling and woke motions from the opposition. And I had thought that conduct could improve on there. It's clear from what you say you did not listen to any of my proposing speech. This is actually a unique opportunity, and just regurgitating political points around budget votes, which were a package of measures, does not actually cut the ice.
Thank you, Councillor Roy. Councillor Nunn.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be very brief. We're tight for time, and I wasn't going to speak. These are crucial things. What was done on CTRS, school meals, carers, the council tax relief, and so on. All good stuff. There is little doubt we promised the people of Northamptonshire, West Northamptonshire, that what we will deliver will be better. And this is a major problem. We've got to get a handle on it. There's no problem with that, and we will. Simple as that. We know we're going to have challenges on what we can actually deliver. The challenges are going to be huge, but we have promised people that they'll get an improvement, and I think that reflects the fact we have to get a tight handle on this. The promises, we've got to get a tight handle on it, and I think this work needs to be followed up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Nunn. Councillor Rubins.
Yeah, just really quickly. I like the idea of this in the sense that I think there's a big debate and a lot of argument that goes on about people's perceptions of poverty and what poverty is, and actually an exercise where, as a council, we try and do more work on it. We can try and drill down into what the actual real detail is. No politics, no perception, actual real detail to drill down into the reality of the situation, so that with the best information at hand, we can hopefully make better decisions. And obviously, it's not all on us at this, because it's not everything is in our purview, but we can at least work out where we fit in the chain of command, as it were, in trying to address these issues.
Thank you, Steve. Councillor Rubins. That concludes the debate. So now going to the motion will now stand referred to the Shadow Executive. No urgent items received this evening. So I want to thank members, actually, for the longest meeting I ever chaired. Started 15 days ago, and we finally got there in the end. So at least that's some achievement. But I want to wish everyone well, whether you're going on to unitary or intending to go on to unitary. It's down to the electorate who gets elected or standing aside. I want to wish you all the very best, and also members of staff all the very best. Those who are going on to unitary, and those who, I mean, the majority are actually going on to unitary, as I understand it. Many members of staff who aren't. But I do wish you all well, and thanks for your perseverance on this. And there's no further scheduled meetings of the West Northamptonshire Shadow Authority. So as your chairman, I'm saying farewell to many of you, because I've got a meeting next week in Daventry, and after that I'll be stepping down on May the 10th. It's been mentioned already. For those members who are stepping down, May the 10th is the last day as a councillor, and will be the last day of the council for those who aren't successful in the elections. But I do wish you all the very best, and thank you again. That concludes this evening's meeting. So thank you. Take care.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you.